Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And in today's video, we're going to look specifically at how to use SOHCAHTOA to find angles and how to find perimeter and area. Now, this was already gone over in the other trig ratios video, but I felt it would be necessary to make a specific video just for finding angles, since there's been some difficulty in that area. So let's take a look. In the first question here, it wants us to find this angle here, labeled x. Oftentimes we label our angles with x or this symbol called theta. These are just variables to denote that it's a missing or unknown angle. Now, when you want to do these questions, the first thing you want to do before you even start solving is to identify what your sides are. So if x is my angle up here, that means the side right across from it is going to be my opposite. This side that happens to be right across the 90-degree angle is my hypotenuse, the biggest side, which leaves this as my adjacent. So after knowing that, I can see which one I can use here. So I can use SOHCAHTOA or TOA. The next question you want to ask yourself is what is given? So in this diagram, what's given is my adjacent and my hypotenuse. I don't have my opposite. So that narrows down my choices. I definitely can't use sine because I would need the opposite. I can't use tan because I would also need the opposite. Leaving me with cosine, which uses the adjacent and the hypotenuse, the two exact sides I have. So I'd start off by saying cosine of x is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse, so 10 over 17. Now, just like always, you are trying to get the variable by itself. You want to isolate the x. And the only way to isolate the x here is you're using this button in your calculator. It's the inverse of the cosine, and it looks like this. It says cosine with a -1. That is called the inverse cosine, or 1 over cosine. Most of the time, you'll find it directly on top of your actual cosine button. You usually have to press like a second button, or a button called second, or shift. Whichever you need to press will find this button cosine to -1 for you of 10 over 17. Okay, please make sure your calculator is in degrees, not in radians. It should say a big D on the top, or DEG rather than a big R or RAD. And if you type it in like that, so you do 10 divided by 17 in brackets, and then you do the cosine of -1 of it, you should get, if you round it to 2 decimal points, 53.97 degrees. That's pretty much as simple as that. So doing that same thing with the second one. Once again, remember your first step is to identify your sides. So if this is my x, then this would be my opposite because it's directly across. Directly across from 90 degree is this one over here, which means this is my hypotenuse, and I don't have my adjacent. So I'm looking for opposite, hypotenuse, I want sine. So opposite, 95, over hypotenuse, 200. Again, find the sine inverse, 95 over 200. Make sure, again, it's in degrees. And if you do that, you should get 28.36 degrees. And finally, if we look at the last one, again, you should get in this habit, identify your steps. Now, I realize I didn't put the x here. The x actually should be here. There we go. If the x is here, directly across from it, boom, 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 boom. This is my opposite. Directly across from the 90 is my hypotenuse, which is missing, and beside is the adjacent. So I have my adjacent, I have my opposite, which means I'm using tan. So tan of x is equal to opposite over adjacent, so 15 over 8. Same steps as before, inverse tan of 15 over 8. And that should give me 61.93 degrees. And that's how you find angles. It's pretty straightforward once you understand the steps behind it. Next up is perimeter and area. And the perimeter and area doesn't change all because we are doing SOHCAHTOA or Pythagorean Theorem questions. The only thing that changes is making sure you find your sides first. So first and foremost, when they tell you perimeter is just all the sides on the outside added. So x plus 100 plus 125 is my perimeter. I don't know what x is. I'm also not given any of the angles other than 90 degrees. So, in this case, it's easier to use Pythagorean Theorem. Now, remember the 125 here, it would be my hypotenuse because it's directly across from my 90 degrees, which means the x is either my a or my b, doesn't matter which one you make it. I do know that I should have 100 squared plus x squared should give me 125 squared. Okay, get our x by itself. X squared should be equal to 125 squared minus 100 squared. So x squared, if you do these squareds correctly, should be getting you 5625. All right. All right, when you do that, you want to take the square root. Remember, you only want the positive value. So x should be exactly 75 centimeters. With that in mind, the only thing left is to actually do our addition. So perimeter is 75 plus 100 plus 125. So my perimeter is 300 centimeters. Do not forget your units. And I know I'm correct because obviously hypotenuse has to be the biggest side, and it is. So 100, this is 75, and my hypotenuse is 125. It's still bigger than the 2, so I know I'm correct. All right, last up, looking at the area. Now, when you're taking the area of a triangle, imagine this is your triangle here. The area of a triangle is always going to be 1/2 base times height. Height is always the perpendicular line. The good thing with a right angle triangle is you already have your perpendicular line. So the line that makes your 90-degree angle is always going to be your height. So remember, area is 1/2 base times height. In this question, we have our base, which is 97. We're missing our height, which is the x. But we have an angle. So we can use SOHCAHTOA here. To figure out what we need to do for SOHCAHTOA, we look right across the 90-degree angle. This is the hypotenuse. I don't have it. What do I have? I have, if I'm looking across from this angle, boom, 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 this 97 happens to be my opposite, which means this happens to be my adjacent. With that in mind, what uses opposite and adjacent? That is tan. So tan of 54 degrees should be equal to opposite, 97, over adjacent, which is x. The variable I want to solve is on the bottom, so use the trick we did before. So x should be equal to 97 over tan of 54 degrees. So if you do this division, you should get 70.47 meters. So I calculated my x there. With my x, I can now find my area. Area is base times height divided by 2, essentially. So I've got 97 times 70.47 divided by 2. And if I do that calculation correctly, you should get 3417.80 meters squared. Remember, it's meters squared because it's area. Make sure you're putting correct units. And that is how you calculate your perimeter and area. I hope this explanation has helped everyone, and have yourself a wonderful day.